Welcome back to A Kitsune's Tale. Please like, subscribe, and comment. Any and all feedback is welcome. Chapter 7. Preparation. I was left shaken by the meeting with Fei Shan. When I emerged from my grandmother's den, I was met by Cano and Kern, backed by dozens of armored warriors. When the door opened, 3 bakaneko stepped back suddenly, their heavy hammers drawn back to strike. Cano grabbed my shirt collar and pulled me away from the heavy door as 2 lycanthropes rushed past me with their shields at the ready and their massive swords drawn. Before they could enter, the door rapidly spiraled closed, blocking the way. Cano escorted me to the back of the mass of soldiers where he gestured for me to sit. "Are you all right? What happened?" Cano was clearly worried. Kern still looked as terrified as he had during the encounter. I tried to see past the crowd of soldiers to the entrance. "I'm fine. Why did you bring all these soldiers?" Cano glanced over at his master of arms. "Master Kern told me that a Kitsune god had taken you. Based on the history of this god, we thought you might be in grave danger. Are you sure you are all right?" I was becoming agitated over the attention being drawn to me. Lacking an enemy, the gathered warriors were now looking in my direction. "I'm fine. He did not hurt me. We spent time talking about my family and about Kitsune in general." My 5 tails twitched of their own accord. I had not even noticed the addition of the new tail until Kern caught sight of them and his eyes grew wide. "Lady Kara, please hide your tails until we can find a more private place to speak." Kern turned to his lord worriedly. "We should talk in the monastery, my lord. There are things we do not need known to the general public." Cano nodded and gestured for Kern to lead the way. At the entrance of the monastery, Kern asked me to open the doors. I obediently used my power the way I had seen Kern do before. The doors closed behind us once we were through. I used my power again to form a stone seat from the floor. I no longer hid my tails, which twitched in agitation. "What is going on?" I demanded. Kern spoke up, asking me questions about my encounter. He was concerned with such questions as what the god wanted and what he said. His last question was, "How did you acquire your 5th tail?" I answered his questions as best I could. There were things I refused to tell him, such as Fei Shan's name and the fact he did not claim to be a god. My talk with Pasha that day after my quest gave me the impression that anyone with more than 4 tails was so feared that the Kitsune rarely talked about them. I knew Kern's question about how I obtained my 5th tail was the most important question to him. He told me that someone had locked away my power, so he removed those locks. After the locks were removed, I had my 5th tail. I thought it prudent to explain what he had told me about my power. The prospect that I had the potential to obtain additional tails would be information that both he and Cano may need, considering the Kitsune fear. He described the different number of tails and the powers that came with them. I was told that I had the potential to acquire others over time should I wish. Kern paced back and forth in front of me in thought. Cano, on the other hand, stood observing both of us. The Lord seemed content to listen to the silent exchange between us until Kern stopped his pacing and addressed Cano. "My lord." He paused to compile his thoughts before continuing. "I think we should send Kara back to her world, my lord. The last war was over her grandmother and her 5 tails. It cost many lives and did not end until she vanished. The very fact that Kara claims to have the ability to earn more tails is enough reason for caution." Cano listened without comment. Instead, he turned his attention to me. "I will not banish you back to the human world, but Master Kern makes a strong point. Should you remain here, there will be much grief. People fear what they do not understand, and that fear will fuel hate." Cano let out a sigh of frustration. "I am asking you to leave this place and find your way elsewhere for the sake of the people. If you choose to stay, however, I will not forbid you from doing so, but ask only that you conceal your tails. If you choose to leave either by exploring the lands beyond or by returning to your own world, you will go with my blessing. I would send warriors to accompany you to the borders of the Alliance and supply you with enough gold to make a new beginning." I could not believe what I was hearing. I had not expected to be asked to leave just because I grew stronger. I also knew I was not ready to return to my world to be subjected to the torments of my school. But why can't I stay here? I already know enough to thrive here, I thought. I do not want to return to the human world. I was tormented there and treated like a child. Here, I am treated with respect and looked upon as an adult. I do not want to cause trouble, so I would like to explore the rest of the world, but I would like time to decide where to go. Cano smiled at this. He honestly liked the girl and wanted to see her happy. He was also filled with awe by the descendant of one of his teachers from so long ago. Very well, take the time you need. Come see me when you are ready and I will arrange your escort. Cano stood. I extended my power with a thought, and the doors opened to allow him to leave. Once Cano was gone, I turned to Kern. What about you, Master Kern? Do you fear me and want to see me gone? Kern contemplated my question before answering. Yes, I am afraid, but not of you, but for you. Because of who you are becoming, you will face many dangers and possible death. I would see you return safely to your own world rather than endure the hardships you will face here. Would you accompany me outside the borders? I would value your teachings and use the knowledge of the world you possess. Kern shook his head sadly. I would not follow you down the path you have chosen. I have family and responsibilities here that are more important to me. We left the monastery in silence. I made my way toward the market district, followed by 2 Bakaneko guards. They tried to keep a respectful distance to avoid detection, but I could feel their presence. I decided to ignore them. Cano obviously thought they might be necessary to protect me or maybe his own people. I was not sure which, maybe both. I was intercepted on the way to Pasha's home by Fishra. The young Huli Jing stood wringing her hands together nervously. Master Sero wished me to invite you to meet with him in your quarters at your earliest convenience. He also asked me to give you this. She handed me a small pouch. Inside, I found it filled with gold coins. He said for you to use it to purchase supplies for your journey. When you are ready to leave, he will meet you with a wagon to accompany you. I was shocked by the offer. The old fox had taken a great interest in my welfare for reasons unknown. I would use the gold to purchase supplies with Pasha's help to pick out what I might need. Tell Sero I will meet him 2 hours before midnight. For now, I have important business that I must attend to. Fishra bowed and left at a run. I found Pasha an hour later talking to a patron, so I decided not to interrupt. I busied myself browsing through the merchandise on display as I waited. I was not really interested in the items, but it kept me from drawing attention. I had assumed my human form so I would not have to consciously hide my tails. Pasha spotted me and waved, but otherwise continued bargaining with the patron. Exhausting the wares, I ventured next door to look through the trinkets offered by an elderly female Bakaneko. Most of the items were made of silver and some other metal I was not familiar with. The elderly woman babbled on about the different items she offered, but I was not really interested in them. Pasha finally finished her haggling and beckoned me over. I thought you would be studying with Kern. I have been asked to leave by both Cano and Kern. I told Pasha the whole story about what had transpired. I told her about my conversation with Kern and his opinions on the situation. I also informed her that Sero wanted to travel with me. Pasha's first reaction was disbelief, then concern. So, you want me to travel with you as well? I braced myself for the expected response. I want someone with me I trust. Cano has offered enough gold to fund the trip and allow me to make a new beginning. Since I refuse to return to my world, I will travel and try to learn more about this power. I can't exactly just up and leave my business. However, I do know some places that you might go. Pasha contemplated the proposal further. She, of course, possessed the same fear inherent in Kitune, but the prospect of travel appealed to her. The only way I will do this is if I have time to pack up my shop and we can trade along the way. I also need to make arrangements to sell my den. I was ecstatic about her agreeing to accompany me. We discussed arrangements until we were interrupted by another customer. Pasha left with the promise to call on me once she had settled affairs. I made my way back to the palace for dinner. The room fell silent when I arrived in the middle of a heated debate. The only two people who greeted me warmly were Cano and Ciro. I took my accustomed seat at the table next to the Hulijing ambassador. Ciro patted me on the shoulder as I sat. Conversation resumed slowly. The tension in the room could easily be felt, and I received a multitude of looks, from fear to awe to hatred. I ate my portion of meat and fruit in silence, listening to the conversation around me. Many of the discussions were about the encounter at the monastery. I overheard one Kitsune I had never met voice his opinion that I should be killed before I could bring the wrath of the nine-tail upon them. Another dismissed the occurrence as superstition and was only the tale of a child desiring attention. My meal finished, I excused myself and retired to my rooms. Outside my room were the same two guards that had been shadowing me all day. They made no comment as I passed. They simply stood at attention outside my door. I made my way to the shower in the other room and stepped into the hot water. Satisfied I was clean, I slipped into my evening robe and settled down to relax and think. Ciro knocked at my door shortly after. I greeted him with a hug and offered him my chair. He took the offered chair with thanks while I took up a spot on the pile of cushions. "I am sorry you are being forced out into the wild, my child. I resigned my post once I received word. My replacement should arrive within the week. I would like to accompany you if you would have me." "Why would you resign because of me?" "There are things I would like to tell you about your grandmother. I have not had the time to do so, nor have I had all the time I desire to get to know you." Ciro leaned forward on his cane and whispered, "Tell me what Fei-shan has told you." I was taken aback by his question. I had never mentioned Fei-shan's name to anyone other than Pasha. There were indeed things this old fox knew that others did not. I retold the same story I had to Pasha. Ciro listened carefully to all I had to say. I also told him about my desire to learn more and why I refused to return home. Ciro began to whimper softly as I told my story. It was strange hearing the sound coming from the old fox. I had heard the sounds made by dogs from my world, but never suspected that these creatures would make the same sound. It took a while for the old fox to regain his composure before showing me a gold bracelet. Etched into the band was what looked like my grandmother's sigil, but in the center of the 5 tails was a shiny red stone. I studied the bracelet in confusion. My grandmother always wore a bracelet identical to the one Ciro was showing me. He leaned back in his chair while I held the bracelet. "Now you deserve an explanation. As I said, your grandmother and I became close over the years. A month before she left for her sabbatical, we were married." My head snapped up to stare at Ciro in astonishment. I could not believe what I was hearing. It was a happy union, one which Cano's father presided over. We spent every free moment together until she left. When she returned, she was changed. She told me about Fei-shan, what he had done and how it had changed her. She told me about our son and what Fei-shan's actions had done to him. We tried to go on as though nothing had ever happened, but it was discovered Fei-shan had been visiting her regularly. Once news got out about him, war broke out within the alliance. I was in the council chamber when word reached us that Kayla had been taken. We searched throughout the alliance for her without success. Over time, the fighting stopped, but Kayla was nowhere to be found. I have mourned for her since, thinking she was dead. But when Cano brought word of you to me, I suspected. I am the true reason Cano sent Sebastian to get you. I did not know what to say. My grandmother always wore the bracelet but never said anything about Ciro. I had once asked her about the bracelet. It was the only time I ever saw my grandmother cry. After that, I never asked about it again. According to my mother, my grandmother had never married, and my father knew nothing about who his own father was. Here before me were all the answers to questions that were never asked. We talked at length well into the night. I shared everything I had ever been told about my father, in addition to my own life and experiences. Ciro, in return, told me about his own family and where he was from. When it was time for him to leave, we had agreed the best place to start my journey was in his home village over a 3-month ride away. Before he left, I hugged him fiercely, nearly squeezing the air from his lungs. He had graciously returned the embrace until lack of air made him retreat from it. I spent the afternoon browsing the wares at the market. Pasha had left her shop in the care of a young, two-tailed kitsune that she had introduced as her cousin. Our first stop was a clothing vendor who specialized in the type of clothes I favored. We spent hours in the shop combing through the endless sea of clothes. We paid the vendor for the 24 pants and shirts, along with instructions to deliver the articles to the palace for me. Our next stop was to a Lowenmensch to be fitted for 2 pairs of boots. The boots were to be made of flexible material to accommodate both my human and kitsune form. Pasha eventually led me to a table laden with blankets, crockery, and weapons. We purchased enough blankets and crockery for 3 people on the road. It was thought best to seek weapons elsewhere. The day drew to a close, and Pasha introduced me to a Lowenfrau, the female version of the Lowenmensch. I had never met any of the females up until this point. The Lowenfrau was just as intimidating as her male counterparts. She stood a head taller than Pasha, who was again taller than me by half a head. She introduced herself as Shirohi. "Friend Pasha bring you to me for guard wagons?" Her accent was thick and harsh. The way she spoke rubbed the senses like sandpaper over fine silk. I guessed her to be about middle-aged, and though not nearly as muscled as the Lowenmensch, she was obviously well-built and agile. Accented muscle rippled over her lean frame with each movement. She stood with her arms crossed over her chest. The sight was intimidating. Her right ear was torn, and her left ear was full of gold rings that stood out against her dark brown fur. Another scar ran down the right side of her face, over her eye, and down her muzzle. The Hulijing ambassador will be accompanying us on this trip. We will be traveling for at least 3 months until we reach our first destination. Afterwards, we will review our agreement of possibly traveling to another unknown location. I waited while Shirohi clicked off figures in her head. "Why you need guard for this travel?" asked that sandpapery voice. "There be no trade. Kitsune no need guard when travel. What be true need for services?" The Lowenfrau was unmoved by my change. She only stood with her arms crossed, waiting for an answer. "We need a guard who knows the countryside. We also expect some trouble on the journey from those who fear what I am." I consciously fanned my tails where they could be accurately counted. I am the first known 5-tail who had been born since the Kitsune uprising years ago. Shirohi eyed me critically. "You be need more than I. I get more fighter go with. Cost 3 gold each fighter. Maybe 5 go. Cost you 15 gold? Pay 10 before go. I want no Kitsune guards with us. Can you supply only Lowenfrau or Lowenmensch?" I was not sure of the popular consensus among the Kitsune, but I was not willing to trust it was good. "All be Lowenfrau. We better than Lowenmensch. We long time do this way." I paid Shirohi the whole 15 gold coins in advance. Pasha and I called on Ciro in his office where he was busy making arrangements. He looked up when we entered and greeted us with a warm smile. "Welcome, granddaughter. What have you been up to today?" Pasha shot me a questioning glance, but said nothing. "We have been shopping for supplies. We also hired guards to travel with us as far as your village." Cairo frowned at this. "What kind of guards?" "We hired a pride of Lowenfrau led by Shirohi. She has done many jobs for me, and I trust her with my life," remarked Pasha. Cairo stroked his chin thoughtfully. "So no Kitsune, then? I have heard of this Lowenfrau. Wasn't she the captain from the Yowl province?" Pasha acknowledged the inquiry. Was Cairo's only remark. "Well, I have arranged for 3 wagons along with Hulijing that I trust to drive them. Cano will be supplying the wagons and teams. I think we should be ready to leave within the next 4 days." Time went by slowly over the week. Pasha had just sold her home the day before we were scheduled to leave. The contents of her shop were packed into one of the 3 wagons to sell along the trip. The second wagon was stocked with the items I had purchased for the trip. The lead wagon would contain Cairo's belongings. Each would sleep in their own wagon on the trip. Shirohi's pack had shown up the day before the trip to inspect the teams. 6 in all had reported for the trip. Shirohi had introduced the extra guard as her daughter, Shiroli, but did not request additional payment for her. I, of course, offered Shirohi payment for her daughter, explaining that she risked as much as any on the trip. Shirohi's ears lifted in surprise. Apprentice never make gold on first assignment. I be paying her 5 silver. Your daughter deserves the same coin as the others, I said. It is my guess she will be doing a lot of the work nobody else likes to do. Please take the coin. If you think she does not perform to your satisfaction, then think of the extra gold as a bonus. If she performs as she should, give it to her. It will encourage her to do her best. Shirohi considered my words carefully. Much wisdom for one so young. I do this. Shirohi pocketed the coins and went about issuing orders to her pride. We left just as the sun began to crest the horizon. Shirohi's team walked close to the wagons, vigilant for any trouble. Kern, along with 24 fighters, ran ahead and behind the wagons. I was relieved to see no Kitune in Kern's formation of soldiers.
We hope you enjoyed the story so far. Please stay tuned for more.